What's something you wish your family would just admit already?
When Emily's text came through, I stared at it for a good 30 seconds before my brain even decided how I felt about it, because on the surface it looked polite, maybe even considerate, but if you knew the history between us, if you knew the way she worded things, if you knew her tone in person, then you'd understand why those particular words landed like a little dart she had thrown from a safe distance. She wrote, "Not sure this event is your scene, it's mostly CEOs and founders, and to anyone else it might have sounded like she was just sparing me an awkward evening, but to me, it was yet another one of those moments where she positioned herself as the gatekeeper to some exclusive world that she was absolutely certain I could never step into." My first instinct, which was so strong I could almost feel my thumbs moving on their own, was to write back something cutting, something that would remind her that she has no idea what I've been working on or who I've been meeting with lately. Something that would snap her out of that habit of assuming she's the center of gravity in every room she walks into. But I stopped myself because I have learned, not easily and definitely not quickly, that sometimes the most effective thing you can do when someone underestimates you is to let them. Let them talk, let them assume, let them believe the little story they've made up about you, because the longer they believe it, the more satisfying it is when the truth finally crashes through. So instead of responding with a smart, biting reply that was forming in my head, I just typed, "No problem, have fun," and then I tossed my phone onto the couch like I was tossing a piece of paper into a trash can. That night I ordered takeout from the place down the street, the one I always go to when I'm too tired to care about cooking, and while I was waiting for the food to arrive, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop to check my email. And there it was, the confirmation I'd been waiting for all week, the one that was going to set the next few months of my life into motion. I read it twice, slowly, because even though I had been expecting it, there was still something surreal about seeing the words in black and white, the official approval, the finalized arrangements, the date locked in. Nobody in my family had any idea this was happening, and if I had to be completely honest, I liked it that way. The thing about Emily, and honestly, about my family in general, is that they've always been very public about their wins. Promotions are group texted, vacation photos are posted before the plane even lands, and even minor social invitations get broadcasted in a way that makes it clear who's in and who's not. I've never played that game. Not because I don't want to share my life, but because I've seen how quickly enthusiasm can turn into interference, or how curiosity can become judgment. The fewer people who know the details, the less they can control the narrative, and for what I was about to do, I didn't want a single person trying to rewrite the story before it had a chance to unfold on its own. Still, sitting there with that email open, I couldn't help but think about how perfectly timed Emily's little "not your scene" comment had been. It wasn't the first time she'd done it. She has this way of dressing condescension up as kindness, like she's doing you a favor by pointing out your supposed limits. Over the years, I've learned to recognize that tone in her voice, that exact choice of words that sound harmless until you really sit with them. She does it with everyone, but with me, it's always been a little sharper, probably because I've never played the role she seemed to have in mind for me. I didn't tell her about the email. I didn't tell anyone. I just ate my dinner, watched a couple of episodes of some forgettable show, and went to bed with that little spark of anticipation buzzing in the back of my mind. I knew that in a matter of weeks, everything about how Emily, and frankly the rest of my family, saw me was going to shift in a way that couldn't be undone. And that's the thing about moments like these. It's not just about proving someone wrong, it's about proving them so wrong that they have to completely rebuild the way they think about you. The next morning, I saw pictures from her event on social media. There she was, posing with people I actually recognized, people I had exchanged emails with, people who were at least aware of who I was even if they hadn't met me in person yet. I scrolled through the comments, all the "so proud of you" and "look at you with all the big names" messages, and I felt nothing but a strange, calm certainty that soon, those same people would be seeing my name in a place she couldn't take credit for or downplay. I didn't even feel jealous, because I knew what was coming for me was bigger than an evening of cocktails and networking photos. Sometimes in life, you get these rare chances to let someone dig their own hole without lifting a finger. They think they're building a pedestal for themselves, but really, they're just stacking bricks you'll stand on when the time is right. Emily had just handed me a fresh stack. I closed my laptop, made a mental note to finalize a few loose ends for the project, and let the rest of the day roll on like it was any other. No big announcements, no cryptic social media posts, no clues. The more invisible I was now, the more undeniable I'd be later. And as much as I wanted to text her back something like, "I think I'll be fine at my own kind of event," I knew that silence would sting her a lot more when the time came. I knew right then that keeping quiet was going to be the smartest move I ever made. If you've ever sat through one of those family dinners where the seating chart might as well be a scoreboard, you understand the way the conversation loops around the same few names with the same breathless tone. How the stories about wins take up all the oxygen while anything that sounds like uncertainty gets nudged off the table. And that is exactly what it felt like the following week when I walked into my parents' dining room and saw Emily already installed at the end of the table as if she had been born there, phone face down like a trophy, chin lifted that tiny fraction that tells you she is curating the scene even before grace is said. She launched into updates before I had even taken a sip of water, tossing out references to a founder she had met and a panel she might be looped into, and a whisper about a venture partner whose last name tends to make certain relatives sit up straighter. And I did what I always do in these moments, which is breathe, listen, and take the emotional temperature of the room like I am quietly running a diagnostic while everyone else is trying to impress a mirror. Grandma did her usual thing where she links achievement to proximity, asking Emily to repeat the part about the unicorn company because apparently the story gets shinier each time it is told, and then, as if remembering I existed, she turned to me and asked, with that soft voice that hurts more than a jab, how my little project was going and whether I had thought about getting out there more, meeting people, making the right connections, and I smiled and said something non-committal that I have learned to keep in my pocket for nights like this, because there are times when the truth belongs to you and you alone, and handing it over early is like giving away leverage you will never get back. Emily took the opening and made it a lesson, telling me that networking is the real currency and that people like us, meaning women who did not come from anyone's private fund, have to work twice as hard to be in the right rooms. And she said it with the tone of a mentor who believes she is being generous, while I sat there thinking about the calendar invite sitting in my email with a date that was already circled in my mind, an invite that would put me in a room where no one would need to pretend I belonged because the stage would make that clear without a single introduction. I asked her a few gentle questions, not because I needed answers, but because people like Emily reveal themselves when they feel safe talking, and she did, telling us about a founder's dinner where you had to leave your phone at the door, about a breakout session where deal flow and runway were said like spells, and about how important it is to be seen, and I nodded while filing away the detail that despite all her proximity, she never actually named a thing she had built or owned, only places where she had been seen standing near someone else's work. The trap with family, and I say trap because that is how it functions when you let it, is that you can spend years being nudged into a role and one night you look up and realize you have been playing it so well they truly believe it is who you are. And I have no problem letting people stay inside their certainty if it buys me the quiet I need to do real work. Yet that night something in me decided I was done subsidizing the performance with my silence when silence meant enabling the little digs, masquerading as concern, especially when I could see the younger cousins watching our exchange like a tutorial on who gets to claim value. So when Emily slid in the ask, she always eventually slides in a sugary request about whether I could look over a deck before her breakfast with an investor because I have a good eye for structure. I saw the opening I needed, not to blow anything up, not to announce anything before it was time, but to cut off the supply that made her feel comfortable, using me while downgrading me in the same breath. In the past, I would have said yes and stayed up too late tightening someone else's narrative so they could look polished in the morning, but I have learned that practice makes patterns, and patterns turn into reputations, and reputations dictate how rooms treat you. So I excused myself, walked to the kitchen under the pretense of refilling a glass, and from the counter I sent Emily a short, clean email with a friendly subject line that said I would be happy to help with storytelling and structure, that I had a consulting rate for pitch materials and investor prep, that the rate included an annotated draft and a 30-minute rehearsal block, that I could turn it around within 24 hours if she signed the attached agreement and paid the invoice that I had already generated through my system, because I knew she would ask the way she always asks, and I felt the quiet click of something important sliding into place. When I returned to the table, she was the picture of poise, but my phone buzzed with a reply that told me I had hit the nerve I meant to hit. A terse line about how she thought we were family and this felt transactional, and I typed back, still seated between my parents and my aunt, that I love family and I love my work and I do not give either away for free anymore, and I added that I want her to win and I am very good at what I do, which is why people pay me, and I pressed send before I could soften it with one of those emojis that makes women sound smaller than they are. The air at the table shifted in that way you can only sense if you have spent years mapping it, because even though no one knew what had just happened, the performance lost its wobble, and Emily stopped monologuing and started asking questions about how my week was. And I answered in measured pieces that gave her nothing to hold on to, because I am not interested in being rewritten in real time so someone else can keep their hierarchy intact. Before dessert, my partner texted to confirm that the embargo date was holding and that our media brief had been accepted by an outlet that would make the reveal unmissable even for relatives who only read headlines. And I let the message sit unread for a minute, savoring the quiet proof that restraint can be a weapon when you sharpen it properly. On the drive home, I forwarded Emily the formal calendar link for a paid prep session the following afternoon, and then I turned off my notifications and watched the road like I always do after nights like these, steady and focused. And when she tried to call to negotiate the price down with a joke about a family discount, I let it ring out, because the discount I have paid for years is over, and the new rate starts now, which, for the first time in this long, lopsided dance, felt like revenge. Dressed as self-respect, neat, clean, and impossible to argue with. By the time the weekend rolled around and everyone squeezed into my aunt's living room for a low-key birthday that was only low-key if you define that as 3 cakes and a rotating slideshow of Emily's latest photographs with people who have job titles longer than their attention spans, I had already finished the paid prep session with her, and I had done it exactly the way I do it for strangers who do not share a last name with me, which means I showed up on time with a checklist. I asked blunt questions without softening the edges to make them go down easier, and I refused to let her skate by on proximity or buzzwords, because the only thing worse than a flimsy pitch is a pitch that thinks it is strong because it borrowed shine from someone else's work. She arrived 10 minutes late with a coffee and a joke about traffic, sat down across from me like she was settling into a vanity mirror, and launched into a version of her deck that could have been a perfume ad, airy and nonspecific. And heavy on logos, so I stopped her before slide 3 and told her we were starting over, just her and her offer, and the outcome she could deliver without a single famous name attached, and she blinked like I had taken away her safety rails, which of course I had. Because railings can also be cages when you do not know how to move without holding on. I walked her through the same exercise I use with founders who do not know what they are selling yet, where I strip the story down to what a smart stranger could understand in under 1 minute, and then I ask the only questions that matter at an early coffee. Which are, what problem are you solving? How do you know the problem exists beyond what you wish were true? What have you done that proves you can make a dent? And what is the next concrete step if the person across the table says yes? And by the time she finished stumbling through the third answer, she had stopped smiling and started thinking, which is to say the session finally began. We replaced jargon with plain language. We deleted the slide that was nothing but a grid of other people's brand marks. We wrote a 1-sentence promise on a sticky note and taped it to the lid of her laptop so she would not wander into social theater. And when she tried to pivot back to a story about the panelist she sat next to at a dinner, I said, as evenly as I could, that if the strongest point in your deck is that you are seated near someone remarkable, you are not ready to ask for money, you are ready to ask yourself why you think you need permission to build. There was a moment, and I clocked it because I have seen it in rooms bigger than this one, where she wanted to be mad at me for not clapping for the costume. And then another moment where she realized I was the first person in a long time who was giving her something better than applause, which is a chance to stop hiding behind any room she can name, and she caught herself, inhaled, and tried again. This time with a story about a pilot program she had quietly run for a few local businesses who were not impressive enough to post, but were honest enough to give her the kind of feedback you can use. And as she talked through what worked and what failed and what she fixed after that, I watched her finally become the center of her own narrative without a borrowed spotlight, which was the only outcome I would have considered a win. By the end, we had a clean 3-minute pitch with 2 clear requests and a short list of follow-ups she could execute without anyone's permission, and when she asked if I could touch up the design on her slides, I said yes and sent her the invoice link again, because this is the part where old patterns try to reattach themselves, and you either hold the line or you lose all the ground you just gained. So at the birthday, when the plates were passed and the living room bubbled with that polite family noise that sounds like love and feels like a test, Emily did the thing she always does and somehow found a way to bring up that founder's dinner again. This time adding a throwaway line about how some people just would not fit in that crowd and that there is a language to those rooms you either learn or you do not, and everyone politely did the little laugh that signals we are all in on the bit. But my phone buzzed in my pocket with a payment confirmation, and I felt that tiny shift in momentum that happens when the story you tell yourself about your role starts to go stale in front of witnesses. Grandma, who notices more than she admits, asked what I was smiling at, and I said, as casually as I could while still choosing each word like it mattered, that I was just glad a new client had finalized their booking for pitch prep and investor rehearsal. And when my uncle asked who, I said I could not share names because confidentiality is part of why people come to me, but I was excited to help someone sharpen their voice instead of borrowing someone else's, and then, because I am done protecting a hierarchy that does not protect me, I opened the family group chat and dropped a simple note that said, "Thank you, Emily, for choosing my practice for your investor prep. Invoice received. Rehearsal confirmed for early morning Monday. See you then." For exactly 1 long second you could feel the floor tilt, because it is one thing to be the cousin with stories about rarefied rooms and quite another to be the woman who is being hired for the substance that gets people into those rooms and keeps them there. And the optics of that difference do not require a slideshow. Emily lifted her glass and said something gracious about investing in herself, which was the right move, but the room had already clocked what had happened. And the younger cousins who have spent years watching the scoreboard recalibrated what they thought they knew about who does what in this family, which was, if I am being honest, the point. Not to embarrass her, not to gloat, but to end the era where my labor was the invisible scaffolding under someone else's spotlight, and to do it in a way that would register without me ever raising my voice. On the way out, she pulled me aside near the coat rack and asked, very quietly, whether I could possibly waive the rehearsal fee because things were tight and we are family, and I said, with the same calm I use when a stranger tries the same line, "That family is why I am charging you what I charge anyone, because discounting my work would teach the people watching that what I do is optional and soft, and it is neither," and she nodded and said she understood even though I know she did not like it, and I smiled because liking it was never the requirement. When I got home, I sent her the annotated deck and the 3 questions I wanted her to be able to answer in her sleep, and then I forwarded a very short introduction email to someone who owed me a favor. Not to hand her an outcome she had not earned, but to get her in front of a person who would ask the same hard questions I had just asked. Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a person who mistakes access for value is to give them a chance to build value for real, and then let the feedback land where it lands. The revenge, if you want to call it that, was not the invoice or the group chat post, although I will not pretend those did not feel good. It was the moment I watched her stand there without a borrowed name to lean on and still find her footing. Which means the next time she tries to keep me out of a room with a line about what is or is not my scene, she will hear herself differently, and so will everyone else. 2 weeks after that birthday, the embargo lifted at 7 a.m. Eastern, and the first headline used my full name in a way that made my hands go still over the keyboard. Not because I was surprised, but because there is a difference between knowing a thing privately and watching the world say it out loud. So I read the piece once without blinking, then again to make sure there were no mistakes. And then I closed the tab and got back to my checklist, because the fastest way to ruin a moment like that is to start performing for it instead of preparing for what has to happen next. The piece was clean, it got the details right, it framed the project the way we intended, it named our partners exactly once, and then focused on outcomes, which is what we wanted, and the final paragraph mentioned the ceremony date, the broadcast window, and the fact that acceptance remarks would be live, which meant there would be no edits, no safety net, no second shot if I rambled or tried to be cute, or forgot the point of the work under the weight of the moment. What struck me, and I admit this without shame because it felt like an answer to a question I had never asked out loud, was that my family group chat stayed completely silent all morning, which told me no one had seen it yet. Not because it was obscure, but because the people who sit comfortably at the top of a family ranking system rarely read the sections where the people they underestimate are celebrated, and I decided, in a move that will sound petty to anyone who has never swallowed a decade of polite condescension, not to spoon-feed it to them. If they learned about me the way strangers learned about me, that would be perfect, and if they missed it until the cameras were already rolling, that would be even better. My partner texted me a screenshot of the headline with an uncharacteristically sappy note. I texted back a heart without words because I needed my brain clear. And then I opened the email from the network with the subject line that made my stomach do the small flip it. Does when a decision can no longer be theoretical, on-air logistics, soundcheck schedule, car call, green room timing, name pronunciation confirmation, lower third spelling, and the request for a one-sentence version of what our project actually does, which is harder to write than any deck because a sentence like that has to carry all the weight without the crutches. I wrote and rewrote that sentence until it sounded like something I would say to a smart friend who does not care about buzzwords, sent it back, got the formal acceptance of the exact wording. And then I sat there looking at the screen thinking about how many nights in this past year I had kept my mouth shut while Emily held court about access being the real currency, when really the currency is being able to stand alone and say what you do in plain English and have it hold up under a bright and unforgiving clock. Around lunch, the family chat finally lit up, but not about me. Emily posted a photo from some breakfast she attended, tagging a person whose name I immediately recognized from the award committee. And her caption talked about how inspiring it is to be in rooms where decisions get made, and I put my phone face down because the old me would have felt erased by that timing, while the current me understood that nothing about that photo could erase the practical fact that later this week a producer would be counting me down into a live mic while my name ran across the bottom of the screen, and there would be no way to pretend that had not happened. Still, I am not above strategic kindness, and I am definitely not above using timing the way other people use tone, so I wrote Emily a short, professional note thanking her again for paying my rate, attached a tighter second version of her deck with a few bolder edits, and ended with a straightforward line that said, "When you talk about your pilot results, do not hide the failure, because a clean fix is more impressive than a vague win." Then I hit send and returned to the ceremony prep, because no matter how good the headline is, a bad live moment can tilt the whole story. The show's senior producer called me that afternoon and walked me through the run of show, asked me what name I wanted the presenter to use, asked if there was anyone I wanted to acknowledge in my remarks beyond the usual, and I said yes, there was. But I wanted to keep that to myself until I was standing there, because surprises land better when they are not warmed up, and he laughed and said he respected an operator who knows how to manage a beat. We set my sound check for early evening the day before the broadcast. We locked the car pickup window, and then he said, almost as an aside, that the committee chair had asked to meet me briefly off camera before the show, which I filed away as an opportunity to state the project's next phase to the person who could accelerate it in a single question. I know you want to hear that I broke and sent the link to Grandma with a super obvious note, but I did not, because at this point the silence was not a stunt, it was a boundary. And a boundary only works if you keep it in the moments when it would feel so good to break it for the quick hit. Instead, I texted my younger cousin, the one who actually listens, and asked if he could swing by Grandma's tomorrow to update the video app on her tablet, because there was a program she might want to watch later in the week. And he said he was already headed over and would handle it, and then he added a question mark because he is not stupid, and I said, just do me a favor and make sure the live channel works, and he sent me a thumbs up and I left it at that. That night, Emily called to run her pitch one more time, and I said yes, because a boundary does not require cruelty, and as she worked through it I noticed the part where she usually tried to show off who she knew had been replaced with a clear ask and a clean next step. And when she finished, I told her it was the strongest I had ever heard her, and she laughed a little too loud and said she was trying a new thing called substance, which, fine, I will take, and then, after a beat, she asked in that airy tone she uses when she is fishing, whether I was planning to watch the awards show on Thursday, because her breakfast companion had mentioned they would be in the building and it might be a good place to network if one knew how to navigate. And I took a breath and said, as neutrally as I could, that my Thursday evening was already booked and I would catch the replay if I could, which was my version of putting a pin in the balloon without making a sound. The last email of the night was a simple calendar invite from the network with the subject line that made my chest feel very still. Live acceptance, Hannah Carter, call time confirmed. Followed by a short note asking me to send a phonetic line for my grandmother's last name, because they had found it on a family listing and wanted to get it right if it came up. And I sat there for a full minute deciding whether to be sentimental about that detail or practical, and then I did what the situation required and sent back the phonetics with a single sentence that said, "Thank you for checking." I slept badly, not because I was scared, but because the track had finally narrowed to the point where stray thoughts have nowhere to go but in circles, and in the morning I did what I always do when my head is noisy, which is make lists until the noise organizes itself, and by noon I had 3 pages of bullet points that all said some version of the same thing, which is stay focused on the work, keep the remarks short. Do not spend your 1 live minute settling old family scores when your presence is already the answer, and then, because I am still human, I opened the family chat and typed a single line that read, "Anyone planning to watch the National Innovation broadcast tomorrow night? I heard it is a good one." And then I hit send and put the phone face down again, because if they took the bait, great, and if they did not, even better. When the producer called that evening to confirm transport and remind me that my microphone test would be the last slot before they locked the stage, he ended the call by saying the thing that made my pulse finally steady, which was, "We have you slotted right after the segment on gatekeeping in the industry," and when I laughed he said he thought I might enjoy the placement, and I said I would do my best not to waste it, and when I hung up I realized the revenge I had been building toward all along did not require a speech or a confrontation or even a dramatic reveal in a living room. It required 1 clean sentence spoken into a live microphone at the exact right time. Tomorrow I would get that sentence. The show day moved like a conveyor belt, steady and non-negotiable, and by the time the producer clipped the microphone to my collar and asked me to count to 5, I had run the acceptance line so many times in my head that it felt less like a sentence and more like muscle memory, which was good because once the red light is on you do not get to negotiate with your nerves. You only get to do the thing you promised yourself you would do. The segment on gatekeeping wrapped with a clean, sharp exchange that landed exactly the way they wanted it to. The presenter turned toward me with that polished smile television people keep on standby. My name appeared at the bottom of the screen spelled correctly with a little note about co-founder and the project title just as we had cleared, and he said my name one more time into the air as if to set it there, then handed me the award and the floor with the same practiced movement people have used on that stage for years while everything else about nights like this has changed. I thanked the committee and the partners in the short, plain way we had agreed I would. I thanked my team with 1 line that they knew was for them because we had written it together, and then I used the only sentence that mattered to me, the one I had sanded down until there was no extra air left in it, and I said that for anyone who has ever been told a room is not your scene, it might be because it is your stage, and when I heard my own voice land in that space without shaking I felt something old and tight finally loosen, not because I had humiliated anyone or dragged private family nonsense onto a national moment, but because I had finally spoken to the person I was a year ago when I took every slight like a homework assignment and tried to outwork a story that did not belong to me. The presenter nodded the way people nod when a line lands with the audience, and with them too, the music came up in that polite we are moving on way, and the producer steered me off stage toward a hallway where a young assistant handed me my phone like a relay baton and said I had a lot of messages, which was both obvious and funny. I do not know what you expect me to say about the first few minutes after, because it is a blur of congratulations and press handlers and a committee chair who shook my hand and said the exact phrase I wanted him to say about a follow-up conversation. But what I remember clearly, as in I could draw it from memory if I had to, is the top of my family group chat lighting up like a pinball machine, Grandma's name at the very top with an all-caps line that read "Call me please because I saw you and I need to hear your voice," followed by a tidy chain of cousins and aunts and uncles who had apparently learned about the broadcast at the same moment the lower third with my name hit their living rooms, and somewhere in the middle a single bubble from Emily that said, "Wow. You really kept that quiet," which made me smile because yes, that was the entire point. I texted Grandma that I would call in the morning because I wanted her to sleep after the adrenaline wore off and because I needed a second to bring my voice back down to earth. Then I texted my younger cousin a thank you for making sure her tablet was updated, and then I put the phone away and finished the press line like a person who knows how to act like she has been there. Because pretending you belong is only useful until the moment you do. Morning came with a polite headache that felt less like stress and more like a receipt for every held breath I had not taken during the last 48 hours. And when the Zoom link popped up from Grandma 5 minutes before the hour, I was already in the waiting room with the camera off, because I wanted them to arrive first and feel what it is like to anticipate me instead of the other way around. One square, then another, then a page of familiar faces that have told my story back to me for years as if they authored it, and then Grandma in the main frame with her hair done because she treats big days like they matter. Which is one of the many reasons I love her even when she is unknowingly part of the rank system that needs to go. She launched right in with her version of the play-by-play, interrupting herself to say that the sentence about rooms and stages made her clap in her kitchen like a fool, and she did not care who heard. And then she asked how I wanted to celebrate because she was not letting this pass without a moment, and I told her I had a plan, and I hoped she would trust me for 5 minutes. I asked everyone to mute themselves and I shared my screen, which I almost never do on family calls because it turns into unsolicited tech support, but this time the screen was the tool and not a prop. And I clicked open a one-page document with a title that said Family Agreements for How We Talk About Work and Wins, and before anyone could make a joke about me turning into a coach, I said, "We are not doing lectures or therapy, we are doing a reset." And the reset is simple, and then I read out loud the 3 lines that I wish someone had said to me out loud years ago. The first line said that nobody gets to call anything little when it is the thing you are building, because the word little is almost always a way of asking you to make yourself small so someone else can stay comfortable. The second line said that bragging about who you stood next to does not count as an achievement worth centering at this table unless you can say what you built because of it, and you should not need my win to understand that. The third line said that if you want help, you ask for help like a grown person, and you pay for help like you respect it, and family love makes that easier, not cheaper. I said those lines without heat because heat would have made it about punishment when I wanted it to be about clarity, and I watched the squares nod in that slow, skeptical way people nod when they are calculating how many of their habits just got named without their permission. Then, because the best time to fix a habit is when a new story has made the old one look foolish, I told them I was taking 2 pro bono clients this quarter, and they were both teenagers in our family who wanted to build something but did not know what to call it yet. And that anyone older who wanted my help would get my real booking link and my real rate, and yes, because I am not heartless, there is a family cap for a set number of hours, and after that it is market price, and if that made anyone uncomfortable, they could talk to their discomfort without texting me about it. I said I was doing that because the scoreboard has been broken for years, and I am not going to spend my 30s being polite about a system that penalizes quiet people just because they do not demand a microphone at dinner. Emily unmuted herself then, and to her credit, she did not cry or flee or spin. She said congratulations, and she said the line about rooms and stages was good, and she said she had more to learn about building without borrowing shine, and I said thank you, and then, because I am not above laying out the receipt, I reminded her that a while back she told me an event was not my scene, and I thanked her for that message, because it turned out to be useful, which made the call go still for a beat while. She understood that I had just stapled last night to last month in a way no one could unsee. She said she was sorry for that comment, and she sounded like she meant it, and I said I appreciated that and I meant it. And then I told her I had pushed a final update to her deck that replaced the logo grid with the pilot results, and that if she wanted to rehearse again, she could book it the usual way. Which is what progress sounds like when you stop asking for apologies and start changing the terms. Grandma closed us out in the way only she can, by saying she liked the new rules because they sounded like respect, and she wanted a printed copy because she intends to wave them around the next time anyone tries to make themselves taller by calling someone else small. And then she said she had called her pastor to brag because she is still, at her core, a woman who believes good things should be named out loud. I ended the call with the sense that the hierarchy had not dissolved so much as been replaced by a different gravity, one where my center of mass was my own, and if you are wondering whether that is smug, it is not. It is relief flavored with something like joy that I do not trust yet. When I hung up, my phone buzzed with a new message from the award committee chair thanking me for the clarity of the acceptance line and asking whether we had room for a pilot expansion in 2 regions they were ready to underwrite. Which made me laugh alone in my kitchen because life really does favor momentum. And then, in a separate thread, a note from Emily that said she had booked a paid rehearsal for the afternoon and attached the 3 concrete customer outcomes she was going to lead with. Which was the exact proof I needed that revenge does not always require a wrecking ball when a blueprint will do. If you were waiting for me to say I forgave everything and we never spoke about the old dynamics again, you are going to be disappointed, because the truth is less tidy. We will probably test these new rules for a while, and some days will be better than others. And people will slip and we will correct, and the project will grow because the work is good and not because anyone let me into a room with a wink. The final move, the one I planned for and delivered, was not the award or the broadcast or the applause. It was letting the sentence I spoke on air do the heavy lifting, so I did not have to, because the loudest, sharpest revenge I know is making the person who told you a room was not your scene watch you turn the room into a stage, and then hold the door for the people behind you without once asking them to shrink to fit.